Welcome to Biology Made Easy. In today's lesson, we are discussing factors that determine ecosystem patterns. That is, why ecosystem patterns are formed. Now, we will discuss factors that determine patterns in general, and then we will discuss factors that form each of these patterns. We talked about the patterns in our last lesson, and we said if this is an ecosystem and we have these as specific species, this is one type, this is one type, this is one type. The pattern of these species, you have uniform, random, clumped. We also talked about zonation, and we talked about stratification or zonation in the vertical dimension. Please check our last lesson. Factors that determine patterns in general, we will look at physical factors. We'll deal with plants first. We talked about soil fertility, soil texture, soil water, mineral salts, pH, very important to plants. We can also have humidity, temperature, wind, speed, and direction, light intensity. Very important to plants because different plants have light intensity tolerance or need. So these are the physical factors and very important in determining the type of patterns. Then we look at dispersal mechanisms. Here we will look at whether seeds or fruits are dispersed by wind or animal. The kind of dispersal mechanism affects the kind of pattern that you get. And then 3, we have the kind of reproduction, sexual or asexual, if you have budding or if it's stolons or offshoots. So reproduction, whether sexual or asexual, also determines the pattern in the ecosystem. For instance, if you have a plant that propagates by forming budding, like water plant, lemna, they can group together, they can clump or form uniform, spread over the water. These are the factors in plants. Let's look at them in general in animals. Animals, also very important. You have temperature, humidity, you have rainfall, you have wind, speed, and direction. Then in animals, what determines their ecosystem patterns is also due to their habits. Habits is way of life. Habits, you can have solitary, the animals live alone. You have social, they live together. Colonial, they live in colonies. Or territorial, they form territories. Then we have the social interactions of the animals. And social interaction is part of habits. But this one, what we have is that the animals interact to search for food, mate, escape danger, for warmth. Here, escape danger or protection. So it affects the way the populations of the animals are distributed, and that is the pattern. Now we want to look at factors that determine specific patterns. That's uniform, random, clumped. And remember, clumped is the most common pattern, clumped. Yes. So in plants, uniform pattern, if you have plants in an area or ecosystem like this, what kind of plants can spread all over? We can think of a water plant like lemna or duckweed, and then you can have water lily, that's lymphia. Then we can look at random pattern in plants. If you can have a plant that is randomly spread in the ecosystem, you can think about plants that are dispersed by wind, like cyber or silk cotton. You can imagine that randomly you can have seeds spread or carried by wind. So cyber, silk cotton, and other plants that are dispersed by wind will provide us random pattern in the ecosystem. Then the random pattern of a plant, you can imagine that plants that explosive mechanism of dispersal, and if the explosive mechanism is strong, it will spread the seeds all over randomly. So you can have this as wind dispersed, can give random. You can also have other plants that will have explosive mechanism. Not only that, if it's also dispersed by animals, we can also have random distribution. So you come to uniform, as we said, there's environmental factors as well as other factors we'll talk about now. Random plants, the dispersal mode plays a very important key in distributing populations of the plants randomly. Now we can come to clumped plants that form the clumped pattern. You can say they are so much dependent on soil conditions, water conditions. If the soil conditions favor the growth, if soil conditions are good in these areas and it favors this type of plant, they will all be grouped in that place where the soil is good. Then light intensities, also very important in determining the clump. Light is concentrated in a small area, so areas of light concentration, small holes, you will have plants growing in clumps in those small areas where light penetrates. Besides that, there's also reproduction modes. For instance, if you have stolons or offshoots, like the suckers of plantain, plants that grow by stolons, they will grow and form clumps in the areas that they can get good nutrients. Offshoots of plantain and banana, they are clumped because of the type of reproduction. So these are for the plants. What about animals? What determines animals' pattern that are uniform? If animals are uniformly bred, form a uniform pattern in the ecosystem, such animals have been known to be highly territorial. Animals that defend their territories, they are spaced equally apart so that one animal will not get into the territory of another. Example, you have wolves, animals that form random patterns. We can have flying insects or birds, and these are influenced by winds, especially flying insects. The wind blows and the insects find themselves random, and they can be found randomly in the ecosystem. You can have animals that are also solitary, e.g. scorpions, that's the random types. Then the most common pattern in animals is the clump, because most animals tend to be social animals. They interact to get their mate, to get food, to get warmth, to get shelter, and so they are found in clumps, areas where they can get all these, and that is how many animals exist, where there is food, where there is warmth, where there is water and protection or shelter. And you have some animals also forming colonies, living in large groups in one habitat or one kind of space, like termites, honeybees. So you have the animals. The clump is the most abundant in both animals and plants. You have termites in their termite mound, that's the colonies. You have woodlouse, where there is decaying leaf litter or detritus. They are grouped there. You have many animals, they form clumps because they need all these. This is what we have for today. The lessons have been useful. Please give us your likes and do subscribe. Thank you very much. Goodbye.